Ahoy everyone, Tightrope here, and today we're taking a look at the 1.6.1 Coral Viper hotfix for Company of Heroes 3. And I have to say I'm glad they got this out before the weekend. So let's dive on in. First off, they implemented a server-side change to prevent the issue of people getting auto-match cooldowns when they did not deserve it when they had not been leaving games. So I saw a few reports of this happening on Reddit, so hopefully this will no longer occur after this hotfix. Before we get into the balance changes, let's have a look at the win rate stats throughout this period. And we'll start out with 1v1. And here you can see Wehrmacht have been overpowering, 55.9% win rate. So yeah, I think Grenadiers, specifically MP40 Grenadiers, have been pretty badly overperforming throughout this 1.60 patch. You can see DAC also slightly above 50%, but not by like a gross margin. And the Allies have been struggling, especially Brits, this patch. Switching over to 2v2s now, you can see that DAC are getting bumped up to 55%. I think this is largely on the back of the Tiger, how strong it is this patch after it got its armor buff, cost reductions, much more accessible, and it's very hard to deal with. I was watching some high level 2s yesterday, and it seemed like US forces especially were struggling, with the Hellcat getting a speed buff nerf, combined with the armor buff on the Tiger. It actually made it very hard for US forces to deal with the Tiger, whereas Brits are a little bit better off because they've got 17 pounder, the Archer as well. They've got a few more options, so they were doing a bit better. But then coming into 4v4s now, and the win rates get even higher for the two-axis factions again because of how accessible the Tiger was, how strong it was. And with these big team modes, typically your resources are more guaranteed. There's less competition over fuel, less cutoffs, so those high-tech units arrive earlier, and they were dominating the team games as well. So let's see if they have addressed these issues in this hotfix. The first and only change to US forces is to the improved bazooka upgrade, getting a cost reduction by 10 fuel. I think previously it was definitely too expensive. At this cost, I'm still not convinced it's going to be that good, but probably worth experimenting with at least now. So if you're planning to go for like a more bazooka heavy composition with either bazooka squads, maybe SSF commandos or paratroopers or rangers, yeah, maybe it's worth playing around with this. Before we get into the Grenadier changes, there was a very important bug fix that affects them listed down the bottom, and it's to do with snares. We saw on 1.60 snares got changed to become exactly how they were like in Code 2, where if you activated the snare on the unit and it was within range, didn't matter how far away it drove, the snare would still go off, which was unlike it was up until that point in Company of Heroes 3, where, there was a little bit of tolerance. The snare didn't have to be completely in the air, but yeah, if you were trying to do it at max range and the vehicle drove away, it usually wouldn't go off. So yeah, they say that they've reverted that change that happened in 1.60. So it should be more like they used to be previous to this, and we'll see how it goes here. I'm going to reverse this kitten, and then fire a Faust at it.
Panzerfaust on that target.
So there we go. You see that? Just about went off, but didn't. And we'll try it with commandos here. What we're going to try to do this time is wait until I can see the squad stop, hit pause, and then reverse. I think that's it there. Yep, doesn't happen there. I suppose I should weigh in on this change because this is very impactful, affects gameplay in a massive way. I think it could be fine for snares to function either way, Code 3 or Code 2 style, but I think if they wanted to change them from Code 3 to Code 2 style, they would need to do a whole bunch of rebalancing because, yeah, the game just hasn't really been designed around Code 2 style snares, so they'd probably have to change a bunch of ranges, change a bunch of stuff, and it would become like a huge balancing nightmare. So I think this is like the safe option. Kind of stick with how it's been up until this point. Because, yeah, if you think about the extra systems they've got in this game, with their vehicle slows after, a snare that doesn't result in energy damage, double snares always resulting in energy damage. So, like, you could double Faust a Black Prince on the front's armor, and it's going to take engine damage, and it's going to be completely useless, right? Stuff like that would make just snares way too strong in this game with the extra systems they've got on top of what they had in Code 2. But I will say that, with units like the Bazooka team, where they could use their Vet 1 sprint into the sticky satchel, they were pretty good in the 1.60 patch, but maybe they can get buffed in a different fashion. So on to Wehrmacht, and starting with Grenadiers, the assault package, they reverted the buff this got, now it costs 50 munitions again. On top of this, now it takes 10 seconds longer to upgrade, went from 20 up to 30. And also a change made to the sprint ability here. They can no longer fire while sprinting. I think previously they could do like one burst while sprinting. So now they can't fire at all while they're sprinting. So a bit of a DPS nerf as they're closing the gap. Related to this, in the infantry company, the officer's quarters upgrade now costs 10 fuel more and takes 15 seconds longer to complete. I'm not such a big fan of this change. I saw players starting to experiment some other builds like Vet 1 Falchion Pioneers and stuff like that. Now these start to apply to calling units as well. And it feels like all of those kind of strategies are getting shut down pretty much just because MP40 Grenadiers were too good. So yeah, I'm not too sure about this change. I'm still not convinced a 28 range Panzerfaust at Vet 3 is a good idea. So we're going to do a quick test here. We're going to Faust this Stuart. We're going to switch owners. And then we're going to do like a rough reaction time from the time we spot the Grenadiers. And then we're going to try like drive away, expecting the Faust to happen. See if the Faust still goes off. Oh, squad's coming. Like that was, I wasn't reacting like quickly or anything, but if you're looking somewhere else on the map, that's probably faster than you'll be reacting in that situation, and the Faust still goes off. So it's just so hard to play against a snare that's that long range. And the breakthrough ability got a lot of its buff reverted. Now it's at 60 seconds instead of 1 minute 30, which I think is a lot more fair overall. It's worth noting as well that the Tiger, we'll cover this shortly, but the DAC Tiger got a fuel cost nerf, but the Wehrmacht Tiger did not, still 180 in the breakthrough battle group. Australian Lights got accuracy buff to the stock standard Lee Enfield rifle. Unfortunately, COH3 stats hasn't been updated with the 1.61 values yet, but let's look at some of the matchups pre-patch 1.60 against two of the most common opponents here. We've got Panzergrenadier first off, and you can see the Panzergrenadier had a slight edge over them close, but the Aussies very slight edge from mid-range onwards. Onto Grenadiers, the Australian Lights has a slight edge over the Grenadiers up close. Then they'll lose to them from about 22 range onwards. And for comparison, let's have a look at Riflemen up against DAC Panzergrenadiers. The Riflemen have a bigger lead right across the whole accuracy range, whole range of fire. So Australian Lights, maybe with their more limited tools, really struggling, and you can imagine that as soon as combined arms comes into play, the Panzergrenadiers are going to beat the Aussie Lights at basically every range. Aussie Lights being more specialized into anti-infantry, not having grenades or anti-tank grenades, this could become a bit of a problem, so I think that's why they buffed them up, because just weren't quite strong enough in those early game skirmishes. Though I hear that once they're highly vet, the Aussie Lights with the scoped upgrades are really quite tough to beat. Also on the Aussie Lights, the sharpshooter ability now has 2 penetration. The issue before this was that up against units that have armor, such as Stossrupen and Guastatori, it would sometimes do 0 damage because it failed to penetrate, and you kind of waste your munitions at that stage. So yeah, now it will do damage every time you use it, which is good. And yeah, this was actually a bug that I reported, so I'll give myself a little pat on the back for that one. The Archer Tank Destroyer now costs 1 less command point to unlock, going from 7 to 6. And if you wanted to rush this out, this would now cost you 9 command points to unlock. They mentioned that it was arriving too late to counter enemy like heavier vehicles. Though I will say, like, looking at the command point costs of other things, purely going through the call-in system, if you want to get to the Panther, that's 11 command points, or the Tiger I think is 13. So this was still arriving quite a lot earlier than those two, but maybe to like the through tech units, maybe the Panther built through tech, or Panzer IVs, Brombeers, stuff like that. This was arriving too late. The Bofors has received a load of buffs. This is what you can build if you unlock defensive tactics in the Australian Defence Battle Group. Got more health, faster rate of fire, better AoE, but slightly worse scatter. I don't think that matters too much because it's got quite a lot of accuracy. So we're going to do a bit of a test here. I didn't do extensive testing on this beforehand, but from what I saw, this was not very good. We want to compare it to the flak emplacement of Wehrmacht, which now has more health then after this change. But first off, we'll look at range. Bofors seems to stop here at about 45 range.
Give him a taste, eh? Hold on!
Well, this can go a bit further, maybe like 10-ish range further. So this has long range. Now we'll test time to kill. Just want to double check I'm not going to be in range of that.
Awaiting orders.
Let's see who goes faster through these units. Very similar. Looks like the Bofors is going to come out on top though. Nope, spoke too soon. Missed a load of shots and then it lost. But it looks like they've got very, very similar performance against a squad out in the open. Looking at costs, the Bofors costs 260 manpower, 35 fuel and 6 population, 40 seconds to build. The flak, 60 manpower cheaper, 10 fuel cheaper, same build time. So you're kind of trading health for cheaper cost. I think you probably want the cheaper cost, right? But I suppose you do get a bit more synergy with the Bofors, right? You can get this hold the line ability that can auto repair it later on. Now we're going to test the flak against the Bofors against the unit that's clumped up on the wrong side of cover. See if the AoE changes are enough to tip the Bofors over the top here. Both have to rotate before they start firing. Okay, here the Bofors gets a narrow victory. Pretty similar though. And final test for this comparison, we're going to try them out against a Stuart. See how that goes. I think this is probably like the largest vehicle that you'd expect these kind of emplacements to be like still good at. Once they get to the medium tank kind of area, you would expect them to fall off a bit more. Stuart only at half health. Oh, flak's killed here. So it seems like in pretty much every avenue, I haven't tested their like anti-air performance, but basically every thing that we've seen so far, flak's got better range, pretty much better killing potential out in the open, slightly worse against units that are clumped up, better against vehicles. I would say, especially at its lower cost, this probably makes this a more appealing option as well. Really, the main thing the Bofors has got going for it, buffs that it can get through here. They've changed the Funkpanzerwagen, which is part of the Battlefield Espionage Battle Group, the new one. I haven't covered this one yet, but I'm working on it. Basically, its camouflage ability can no longer camouflage vehicles in the area. They say that it was too strong, especially with med trucks being next to this, being camouflaged. Too hard to counter, especially in like team game scenarios. And caused too much overlap as well when it's camouflaging vehicles with the entry ability Operation Scorpion. So yeah, they're toning this back here. Only camouflages infantry and team weapons now, no longer camouflages vehicles. The Tiger that you can call in through the Armored Reserves unlock has had a cost increase, going from 180 to 220 now, which I think is a good idea. I saw some screenshots on Reddit where players were having this out at around the 13-minute mark, which is just insanely fast. And these games, they say, weren't even that lopsided. We all saw how strong the DAC win rate was in those big team modes. And you know, those big team modes, they have more secure fuel. It's much easier to rush out these high-tech vehicles. So they're putting a delay on this by 40 fuel, which is alright. You know, maybe about a minute and a half later on, it'll come out now. Slow things down a bit. I'm still not entirely convinced that the frontal armor buff on this was a good idea, especially when combined with the flanking speed nerf to the Hellcat at the same time. I think it makes it tough for the US forces to deal with this. On top of that, makes it very difficult for any infantry-based anti-tank short of the 17-pounder to penetrate this now. Anti-tank guns, bazookas and stuff have a really hard time with the Tiger, so yeah, I'm not too sure about that change as well. And finally, Panzerjagers on their Panzerbuchse has had a damage penalty added to it against buildings and destructible objects, but not against bunkers. they mentioned they tried to bring it in line with the Boys AT rifle. So we're going to try it out here. This unit's going to be, behind sandbags, behind tank traps. I'm going to get shot at. This one's going to be in the building. See how fast these get taken down. I mean, it still gets through the building at a reasonable rate. It's not super slow, but yeah. Could you imagine if this was like twice as fast? 3 times as fast? And finally, there are a few more bug fixes, but nothing that really affected gameplay balance too much. So I think overall this is a pretty good first step on the path back towards balance. I do think Axis are probably still going to have the edge after this patch, but maybe it shouldn't be by quite so much anymore. So that's good news. I will also say that a lot of players were complaining about how slow this balance patch was, especially compared to the previous one with Re-Echelon, Royal Engineers being so strong. But, just give them a bit of a break on this one, guys, because, they went through a whole bunch of layoffs, I'm sure. That's not an easy time. And also, the previous patch was definitely an exception to the rule. With the tournament coming up that weekend, they wanted to act fast. So, yeah, whatever. Thanks so much to all of my Patreon backers, and if you enjoy my content, I hope you consider coming on board.